Here's part 2 of our most recent Legal AI Live on LinkedIn. If you missed part 1, make sure to go subscribe at legalailive.com and check out our YouTube channel or Legal AI Live on any podcast app to catch part 1. Follow the Legal AI Live page on LinkedIn to watch us live. Without further delay, here's part 2.
And it's everywhere on the web these days, right? So it's it's $19.99 a month or it's $150 a year. You make your choice. So I don't know what about you, Greg? Your thoughts on developing Plan B? Because I don't know whether you can talk about it, but I'm sure that's part of your thinking.
Yeah, I mean, looking at it from an enterprise standpoint, certainly if you're building an AI tool, you can think about it with the models themselves that, are you're hitting the APIs for whatever you're building. And it's not just that, what if Anthropic goes out of business? It's also, what if one of the models deteriorates in performance or another one leapfrogs it in terms of quality? And that may cause you to need to change all of your prompts or other aspects of your architecture. And so it's a significant business risk that you have to think through when you're building something before the problem arises.
And Gio? I
made that decision I said Lexus. I made that decision last year with Lexus. I said, who's going to be around in 2-3 years with all the startups that are coming up? And I remember when Lexus started, 45 years ago, and I was amazed at what they could do. And I pretty much stuck with them. Westlaw also. So I committed to it, but I also am jumping around on different tools because, and I don't know whether or not it's like the whack-a-mole, something pops up and I want to try it, but they're popping up all over the place. And I listened to Matthew, what he's tried here and there, and I don't know where it's going to end up, but I'm always looking for everything else. And I'm not going to rely on just one tool. I'm going to rely on several.
Yeah. So my thoughts on this kind of come from, a number of places, but a lot from my time at MasterCard. So I like to think in terms of what capabilities am I buying rather than what vendors. So what do I actually need to accomplish, and then what allows me to accomplish that best? And I kind of divide the playing field into experimental tools where I can take a high risk, and if something doesn't work, I replace it. And I think Matthew has a similar approach on that, versus something that I really need, where I need to have a backup plan. And then typically you have the money back thing, of course, but you typically are looking to say, can I get my data out somehow? So or at least output out, and what can I do within a given tool where I document the processes I do? So if I switch to a different tool, what is that going to be? Because that internal expertise that you develop will outlast any vendor ultimately, because I think these days, if you're good at AI and you change jobs and you say like, oh, I was at a Lexus shop and now it's Westlaw, you just make a few adjustments and go. So I think there are a number of things out there. I just think we have to, and the signs are there, we need to pay more attention to this. So I don't know, Damien, I'm especially interested in your thoughts on this and in terms of what you might be allowed to say on this.
Yeah. So of course, it's no secret that Jack Newton on stage from Clio, CEO of Clio, has talked about the combination of the business of law and substantive law. That is, if you have a new matter that comes in, to be able to say, okay, it's this type of matter in this jurisdiction with these kinds of documents, to be able to connect to substantive law and be able to say, oh, let's connect, here's personal injury cases like yours, or here's a slip and fall case like yours, or here's a family law case like yours. Maybe that has won in front of your judge, and that here's maybe motions that have won in front of your judge. And to connect that business of law with substantive law, then, when you think about the vendors, from the vendor's perspective, you want to be able to have a hook that others cannot do that you are going to be able to do. That is, what is your moat? And so if I were on Matthew's perspective, I would, of course, want to use as many things as possible, right? To be able to distribute both my risk and also using the cutting edge capabilities. And then how do I, as a vendor, essentially try to lure Matthew over to my side is to be able to say, here's something that can do something that even if you distribute it, you can't connect the business of law with the substantive law. Claude's not going to do that. OpenAI is not going to do that. Google's not going to do that. And so really any legal tech vendor is going to say, what is my moat? That is, what can I do that OpenAI and others cannot, and be able to exploit that moat. And for Clio, it's the business of law connected to the substantive law. And by the way, TR is not going to do that. Lexis isn't going to do that. Nobody else can connect the business of law and substantive law.
Yeah, so the vendors are trying to create the moats, and we as the users are trying to create the drawbridges over the moats, right? Or multiple drawbridges.
I want, Damien, I want to keep going back to Clio, because one of the things that I think that something like a CRM like Clio should be able to do, what I just mentioned, what I do with Lexis's Vault. I don't want to have to dump documents into all the time into something new. I would like to have my case in Clio, my client information, everything that I've gathered available, and have that integrated immediately with an AI. And
that's what I described.
Yeah,
Clio does that. So the idea is that you have all of your matter within Clio, and then the substantive law can be able to analyze that.
I hope it works this time, because I am excited to have that opportunity as a practicing lawyer.
Yep, he just announced it on stage last week, 2 weeks ago. So yeah, so it's.
I know that's why I hope we could talk about that.
So Matthew, you want to go to this follow-up question, or because I want to turn to ethics a little bit. This might be a good lead in.
Yeah, I think it also relates to what we were kind of just talking about in a way from Chris Warner again. Thanks, Chris, for keeping the chat going. Also to Muna Omar, Nick Rashrain commented in, Dennis Kennedy, how do you get all these good-looking and smart people together at once? So thank you.
This is Nick trying to get on, right? On the panel, which he is, of course, invited to do.
Okay, great. And also I'll shout out Siobhan Al-Hussein commented in, right? Ben Shore had some back and forth. So thanks, everybody. But back to Chris's question. He said, how should we think about the ethical concerns around sharing confidential privileged information with an AI, even a paid version that's supposed to hold the information secure, confidential, et cetera? If there was a bankruptcy or liquidation or otherwise, I think about what happened with 23andMe, where all your genetic data now, who owns that genetic data, right? So sort of similar concern there. And there may be some bankruptcies. I mean, my initial thoughts are I think there's more likely to be acquisitions or fire sales than there are to be bankruptcies and liquidations. I think you'll see some mergers, you'll see some acquisitions more likely than seeing bankruptcies and liquidations. A lot of these venture capital backed, startups, they want to at least get a 1x return on their investment, right? Like get their money back, right? Like you could get that. So that's my sort of perspective on that. Is I'm less concerned about that. I think they're still going to do a better job than I would as a solo practitioner with the privacy, security, and the data and stuff. So what am I to do but to have my own? But to have a third-party provider do that. There was another question about firms having their own baby LLMs or small language models, right? So there's sort of related in a way.
Yeah, so I got this question from judges too. And so, I mean, for me, the bottom line is, so I spent, I don't know how many years doing technology law. So let's say 20 years. And so my perspective is going to be different than other people. And my time at MasterCard also factors in on that. So I have certain evidence that supports my belief about confidentiality in the handling of data, right? And that's just my perspective and my bias with you, if you will. And when I hear this question from lawyers, I say, what I'm hearing is this weird kind of learned helplessness. Well, you got to go out and satisfy yourself. I mean, you got to go figure this stuff out. If I say to you, hey, based on my experience from my slice of the world, here's what I think and here's what I'm comfortable with, you're probably not going to rely on that. And why would you rely specifically on a vendor? Why would you rely on what an expert witness on the other side says? You need to go out and do your homework on this stuff and come out and figure out what it does. And one of the things I like about talking with Matt on these topics is Matt goes out and does his homework on this stuff. And then the other thing is well, we're lawyers and we're used to dealing in hypotheticals and stuff when we talk to people. So there are ways to use AI without putting in any confidential information, you know? So why don't you start with that? Like why you're saying like, let's take the most important confidential information and just throw it into an AI, it that actually, and we'll probably get to this, but to me that comes down to technology competence. Like I don't even understand like why you're thinking about doing that. Okay, so that's my soapbox. Damien, I see you have.
I've got some. So my thought is this goes back to trust. And do you trust the contracts by the vendors? Because we, for decades, have said that we trust Microsoft Outlook based on their terms of service, that we can push confidential information back and forth. So because the terms of service say, yes, I can trust Microsoft Outlook for this, shouldn't I also be able to trust Microsoft Azure, which is the AI side, to be able to do that? And maybe I shouldn't do, and maybe I trust Google for Gmail. Maybe I could also trust Google Gemini because of the terms of service. So this goes back to trust as elucidated by contract. So that's thing number one. Thing number two, of course, each of the companies I just mentioned has SOC 2 Type 2 certification, right? For secure, saying your data is secure at rest. And they also say that we will not train on your data, right? And they also have ISO security. So compare that security with what do lawyers do to secure their laptops? What do lawyers do to secure the paper on their desk from their cleaning staff? And when you put it in that, like that SOC 2 Type 2 and that terms of service looks pretty darn good compared to how lawyers secure it. So I would say that if you trust Microsoft Outlook for being able to send email, maybe trust a tool that's built atop Azure to be able to secure it as well.
I think you also have to think about data governance policies that are within your own control. I mean, maybe don't leave a case file up on the system if you're not actively, using AI to query the case file, or delete your prompts from ChatGPT or wherever you're using them. I think there's a lot of self-help. It doesn't get you all the way there. But, in addition to reading the contract, which any good lawyer should do, you're not helpless.
Yeah, so the classic thing when the ABA did the technology survey every year, on the issue of, and I wrote the summary on cloud computing, but there were questions about like, which of these basic security steps do you take? And one was like reading the contracts, which was the highest, and it was 37% of lawyers did that. So, if you're telling me like, I'm worried about this stuff, I'm going show me that you're actually, this comes from my days of being in St. Louis, but show me that you're actually doing something. Because otherwise you just sound like you're just really helpless to me and you're not doing what I would think you would do automatically as a lawyer.
Software has a saying RTFM, that is read the effing manual. And so you could say what Dennis just says is RTFC, read the effing contract.
Thanks for keeping us from not having to use the explicit tag, Damien. Increases the reach of the pod.
It took a lot of self-restraint to do that.
So I had a couple things also queued up, but I want to go with this one because we're seeing more and more the hallucinated cases, and it's moved from like the classic small firm lawyer story to like the really big firms, to judges confessing what they're doing, and it's sort of escalated fairly quickly. So again, I was thinking about this because it's couched in terms of ethics. I have an ethical duty to do these things. People say like, well, I need to check all the cases. So I've been around the world of ethics, technology ethics in law for a long time. And the more I think about this, I think the sanctions cases that we're starting to see aren't actually ethics failures. They're just basic competence failures. And so we need to think about that. And so I want to tell the story of a judge was saying that she had a lawyer in who filed a brief with hallucinated cases. Okay. And caught it. And after a little back and forth, they admitted it. And they said, well, what do you want me to do, Your Honor? And she said, I think you should self-report to the disciplinary counsel for the bar. And I was like, which is not going to be popular with lawyers, right? But I was like, you know what? Rather than the $5,000 fine or, try it again, or here's a written reprimand, that's not a bad thing to say, like, this is what you need to do. And instead of certifying that you didn't use AI or whatever, if it happens, then you're gonna self-report, and you're gonna certify to the judge that you self-reported, and make it have some sting. So anyway, I sort of feel that this is the idea that some of this stuff is like a new AI problem isn't right, and that we've really reached this kind of teachable moment about what technology competence might mean in the world of AI. But I think that we got to hold people's feet to the fire. If I know it's like a $5,000, I think it was like $25,000 fine for one of the biggest firms in the world, on one of these things, that's like a license to do it. Matthew, you were nodding your head.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, that's an expensive license still. Like like in the solo small firm area, like that's an employee. But yeah, look, there are always going to be risks about using new technology. There's just about hiring new employees, right? And what still boggles my mind is there are some quote unquote best practices that have just come out in the ARDC, the Attorney Registration and Disciplinary Committee or Commission for the Illinois attorneys. And there's this new guidance that just came out, and some of it's already dated because it took them how many months to get together to put, information out there. And it's like, oh, well, you're just going to have to verify everything. So it could take just as long to do the work. Like, we're way past that complaint. And so some of this is like, well, where are they getting their information from? And their information is just outdated, right? And so like I was at a Chicago Bar Committee meeting where one of the ARDC attorneys was, explaining the new findings and what their recommendations are for lawyers. And I was having back and forth. And this attorney was incredibly open-minded about like, oh, like I didn't know that was like a thing now, or that these tools could help you get there faster, or that it opens up side by side the case so you can verify it right away, right? Not have to go to some other research tool. So, some of it is just like there's still a lot of bad information out there. And so I don't necessarily blame the lawyers. It's like where are they getting their information from? Obviously not Legal AI Live.
Yeah, 100%. And I agree with that. And I think that this is the continuous wave of people using AI hallucinated is both good news and bad news. The good news is the allure of AI for law is undeniable. Like everybody is realizing, oh, everything we do as lawyers involves words. We ingest words, we analyze words, and we output words. And it turns out AI does that at a superhuman speed and at a postgraduate level. So, there's the old joke that faster, better, cheaper, pick two. Because you can have faster and better, but not cheaper. You can have cheaper and better, but not faster, right? But with this new world, you can have all three. AI gives you faster, better, and cheaper. So I think the fact that people are showing up with hallucinated cases show that they're at least willing to use the tools, even despite these risks. So I guess that's kind of good news in a sense. But the bad news is they're using the wrong tool for the job. They're essentially saying, this wrench sucks at hammering. Yeah, don't use a wrench to hammer. Right? Don't use an out-of-the-box large language model to hammer.
But you could kind of use a wrench to hammer, though. Like, that's the thing. It's like, no, they're using like a power drill to saw. And like, it is just totally like not going to help them.
That's right. So I think that taking that bad news and putting, a little bit of icing on to be able to say, okay, here's the silver lining, is we can tell those bad nosed people to say, no, you have a whole bunch of hammers at your disposal. Just pick a hammer.
Greg, your thoughts?
So I guess the other way to look at this, of course, I believe lawyers have a duty to be competent and to use common sense and to not submit, fictitious case law in their briefs. But I wonder if we might get to a point where we accept that people are just can't help themselves, and that you could imagine an e-filing system where it will reject the filing if it finds, hallucinated case citations in the brief.
I wonder if there are AI-based solutions for these problems rather than just relying on humans to do the right thing.
What about you, Gio?
The tools are out there. We just have to learn how to use them. We have to understand that, okay, I had a law clerk, and now the law clerk is an AI. But my old law clerk comes in and gives me a brief. Do I accept it on face value? Do I challenge it? And you have to dig into it. You just can't, as a competent lawyer, just cannot rely on one thing and not just his own brain. You have to look at other sources and you have to verify. You have to verify. In the problems I've had, there were real cases. They weren't hallucinated cases. They were real cases. It was the wrong case. All right. That was an editing problem. It wasn't an AI problem. It was an editing problem. But I've also seen judges are ready to write an opinion, and they want to jump into this, and they want to make a statement about this. And we have to be cognizant of that, and we have to be careful, and we have to use the right tools, and we'll find the right tools. And in the meantime, we're going to stumble, and it's okay because it's a growing experience. Like we'd learned, not every fax was accurate, was right, or got delivered. Not every email gets delivered still, sometimes they go to the wrong address, and sometimes something spills over. Do I self-report because I sent a memo that was intended to the client to the wrong person? Do I self-report that, Dennis? When do we just sit back and say, all right, these are growing pains, and we are going to make mistakes, and we are going to find solutions, because that's how technology has been working since I started using it in 1982, and it's not changed since then. It's just becoming more and more complex. I guess that's the only thing I could say.
5-minute warning. We have enough for a lightning round, and then everybody could say like what they're up to next before next month.
Yeah, Gio, so my thought is if a judge tells me I need to self-report, then I better self-report. And I just think it becomes a potential option rather than these small fines or say, please don't do this again. Because I think we have to have some sting, on these sanctions for them to do any good. So yeah, let's do the lightning round. So just on this, I just want to say what we'll do, and we'll start with Matthew, is sort of one great AI tip or learning that you have for our audience for this show.
Just the comment browser, which is not one that I've said earlier on today's session, but I've mentioned previously. OpenAI has Atlas now, I believe is what they're calling it. I haven't played with Atlas because I'm doing well with comment browser. Still a lot of unknowns, so I'm not signing in with my law firm account. I'm signing in with my consulting company account, but I'm still able to do things like in the chat here. I've been chatting with Sarah about like something I'm able to do with contracts are inside of your legal AI tool that's protected and secure. You could create a chart of a table of all the deadlines of certain things for a contract. You could export that chart, upload it into the assistant in the comment browser and say, put all these deadlines in the calendar and invite my clients, invite these emails to these deadlines and set reminders. You just give it the instructions of what to do. And then at scale, you could set all these things in your calendar. And so like I am still mostly just using my comment browser as a calendaring assistant, but it does it so fast and at scale, and it's really good. And really, I'm trying to figure out what's more things I could give over to the comment browser to just do for me. And it's doing some basic editing in Canva and exporting too, like not necessarily legal specific, but like legal adjacent, like administrative adjacent. So I'm just more and more admin stuff to the comment browser.
It's kind of interesting how AI is going to help lawyers' delegation skills across the board, I think. How about you, Greg?
All right, so this is a little, I guess, toward the egghead end of the spectrum, but I was reading some research that if you tell an AI to give you a response that's at the far tails of its probability distribution of the different possible responses it could provide, you can get it to do some much more creative things even than if you're adjusting the temperature of the model. So I played around with it, and it seems to work, and it's really interesting to see how far out there the models can go.
Yeah, that's it could be a cool application in brainstorming. Definitely.
Yes, absolutely.
Because I think that, like you said, the temperature has its limitations, definitely, if you can figure out how to use it. Gio, how about you?
I'm still trying to figure out what I'm doing with AI. It's every time I pick something up to do it, it's a new learning experience. I'm still absorbing it, but I think that's also a function of my age. I'm not as young as good looking as Matthew is. So
I don't know. AI might be able to help with that, right? My main tip is if you're wondering whether AI can do something, just try it. Try it in a paid version, though, but try it systematically and as an experimenter or an investigator. So Remember I started with saying like, oh, I tried it with this satellite map, and it did great. It was like a clear, verifiable task. I knew the experiment worked or not. But the presentation images, I went in thinking that it was going to be great, really helpful, but it failed, and it let me know that the generative AI is still not there for what I need. And so it's like hypothesis, test, document, and then learn from it. And then not every experiment with AI is going to succeed, but it's going to give you valuable knowledge. And as a result, those experiments are going to create some knowledge assets for you based on experiments. And you can divide those into low stakes and high stakes. And I just think that I just approach AI as a scientist, and I think it's a great way to go. Damien?
I think that getting back to the, bad lawyers are going to bad lawyer. I was a judicial clerk, and lawyers would always say Proposition X, Smith v. Jones. And then I, as a clerk, would look at Smith v. Jones, and it doesn't say Proposition X anywhere. So I would say this is something that we've had for decades, but it's never been as, hallucinated. Smith v. Jones has always existed. So I think what this is doing is shining a bright light on what has been a flaw in the lawyers for decades, maybe centuries. But what if you had a tool to identify the hallucinated cases, as Greg said, but also had a tool to identify whether the Smith case said Proposition X? That would take care of, that would be a solution to the problem we've had for decades. And stay tuned.
Yep.
So next month, I mean, unless people can't attend here on the panel and another potential panelist, November 14th would be the second Friday. Is that good for everybody?
Yep.
Okay, so we'll be back. Everyone who's watching live will be back November 14th.
Is that a wrap then, Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, unless everyone wants to go around quickly, I mean, and say goodbye. Oh, we lost Gio though.
No, I think it's great. I think what to look for between now and the rest of the year is looking at the rest of the business world and to start to wonder whether layoffs are going to hit the legal profession here between now and January. And with AI either being the reason or the excuse, probably the latter. And the other thing I would say from the National Association of Women Justices presentation I did is I think the access to justice implications of AI go way beyond the efficiency issues that big law is looking at.
Yep. I think access to justice is what we could do a whole Legal AI Live on AI's impact on that. Maybe we should have Nikki Black on because she's been writing a lot about that.
Cool.
All right, so then we'll say goodbye. Thank you, everybody who joined us live on LinkedIn. We had more concurrent viewers than we've ever had before. It only took 10 months of 10 consecutive months. We barely made it to the last day of October to keep doing this every month. And more interest in the comments than ever before. So that's enough vamping. I think we've now captured everything on LinkedIn Live. So thanks, everyone, again, who's seeing this live on LinkedIn. We'll disconnect now.